Our grandparents ate during hard times. Have you ever wondered how your grandparents managed to put food on the table when money was tight? During the Great Depression and wartime rationing, families became masters of making delicious meals from whatever they could afford. Today we're exploring 25 ingenious dishes that kept families fed through the hardest times in American history. Let's start with wacky cake. This Depression-era marvel earned its name because the recipe seemed downright crazy. No eggs, no butter, no milk, yet it produced a moist, delicious chocolate cake. Born out of necessity in the 1930s, when dairy products and eggs were luxuries most families couldn't afford, this ingenious dessert mixed everything right in the baking pan. You'd make 3 wells in a mixture of flour, sugar, and cocoa powder, then pour oil in one, vinegar in another, and vanilla in the third, before adding water over everything and stirring until smooth. The vinegar reacted with the baking soda to create the lift that eggs normally provided. At just pennies per serving, when a dozen eggs cost 18 cents, nearly 2 hours' wages for many workers, wacky cake became a staple at church socials and community gatherings. Families would bake it for Sunday dinner, birthdays, and holidays, when traditional cakes were out of reach. The recipe spread through women's magazines and community cookbooks, becoming so popular that many families continued making it long after the Depression ended, passing the recipe down through generations as a reminder of resilience and creativity. Water pie. This seemingly impossible dessert sounds like a joke, but water pie was deadly serious business for families trying to create something sweet from almost nothing. The filling consisted of just water, sugar, flour, and a dab of butter, poured into a pie crust and baked until it miraculously set into a translucent, custard-like consistency. Vanilla extract, when available, added flavor to what was essentially sweetened, thickened water. The chemistry was simple but effective. The flour proteins created structure, while the sugar provided sweetness and helped with browning. During the Depression, when fresh fruit was a rare treat and canned fruit cost precious money, water pie offered dessert for mere pennies. Southern families particularly embraced this recipe, sometimes adding a pinch of nutmeg or cinnamon from the spice rack to fancy it up. The pie's texture was surprisingly pleasant, similar to chess pie but lighter, with a subtle sweetness that satisfied dessert cravings without breaking the budget. Many who grew up eating water pie remember it fondly, not for its gourmet qualities, but for the love and determination it represented. Mothers and grandmothers refusing to let hard times steal every bit of sweetness from their children's lives. Mock apple pie. During World War I and the Depression, when fresh apples cost more than many families could spare, clever cooks discovered that Ritz crackers could convincingly imitate apple pie filling. This culinary illusion involved breaking crackers into a pie crust, then pouring over a syrup of water, sugar, cream of tartar, and lemon juice, seasoned with cinnamon and dotted with butter. As it baked, the crackers absorbed the spiced syrup and softened to a texture remarkably similar to cooked apples, while the lemon juice and cream of tartar provided the tart notes expected in apple pie. The Ritz Cracker Company even printed the recipe on their boxes during the Depression, and it became so popular that they continued featuring it for decades. At church potlucks, few could tell the difference, especially when served warm with a dollop of whipped cream if available. The pie cost about 20 cents to make, compared to 60 cents for a real apple pie. Many families served it at Thanksgiving and Christmas, maintaining holiday traditions despite economic hardship. The psychological boost of having apple pie on the table meant more than the actual ingredients. It represented normalcy and American tradition during deeply uncertain times. Hoover stew. Named derisively after President Herbert Hoover, whom many blamed for the Depression, this one-pot meal fed thousands in soup kitchens and countless more at family tables. The basic recipe combined elbow macaroni, canned tomatoes, hot dogs, or any available meat scraps, and whatever vegetables could be scrounged, usually onions and potatoes. The ingredients simmered together in a large pot, creating a hearty stew that could be stretched with more water and macaroni as needed. A single pot could feed a family of 6 for less than 30 cents, when the average family food budget might be $3 per week. Government relief programs often distributed the ingredients, and Eleanor Roosevelt reportedly served it at the White House to show solidarity with struggling Americans. The dish's genius lay in its flexibility. Add corn when available, throw in wilted cabbage, use bacon grease for flavor when butter was unaffordable. Churches and community centers kept enormous pots bubbling, ladling out portions to long lines of hungry families. Despite its association with hard times, many developed genuine affection for Hoover stew, and variations remained popular in working-class households through the 1950s. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Known affectionately as SOS in military mess halls, this dish became a civilian staple when veterans returned home and families needed to stretch meat rations. Dried salted beef came in glass jars, didn't require refrigeration, and cost a fraction of fresh meat prices. The cook would tear the leathery meat into strips, sometimes soaking it briefly to remove excess salt, then cook it in a white sauce made from flour, butter, or margarine, and milk, or more often, evaporated milk diluted with water. This creamy mixture got ladled over toast, creating a filling meal that delivered protein for pennies. During World War II, when meat rationing limited families to about 2 pounds per person per week, a single jar of chipped beef could provide several meals. The dried beef's intense, salty flavor meant a little went a long way in the cream sauce. Mothers would serve it for dinner with canned peas, for breakfast on Sundays, or for lunch when the children came home from school. The dish's popularity endured well past the Depression and war years, becoming nostalgic comfort food for generations who remembered gathering around the table for this simple, satisfying meal. Spam with potatoes. When Hormel introduced Spam in 1937, it revolutionized Depression-era cooking with affordable meat that required no refrigeration. At 25 cents per can when fresh pork cost 30 cents per pound and needed immediate use, Spam offered convenience and economy. Families would dice it and fry it with potatoes, either leftover boiled potatoes or fresh ones cooked right in the pan. The Spam's fat rendered out, coating the potatoes with porky flavor, while the edges crisped to golden perfection. During World War II, Spam became even more essential as fresh meat disappeared into military rations. Hormel produced 15 million cans weekly for troops and civilians alike. On the home front, creative cooks discovered dozens of ways to prepare it: Spam and eggs for breakfast, Spam sandwiches for lunch, Spam and potato casserole for dinner. The combination with potatoes was particularly popular because potatoes were cheap, filling, and available year-round from root cellars. A single can could flavor enough potatoes to feed a family of 5. By war's end, Americans had consumed hundreds of millions of cans, and the Spam and potato skillet had earned a permanent place in American comfort food culture. Fried bologna sandwiches. Before lunch, meat became associated with delis and fancy cold cuts. Bologna was the working person's protein, selling for 15 cents per pound when choice beef cost 40 cents. The genius of frying bologna transformed this humble cold cut into something special. Mothers would score the edges to prevent curling, then fry thick slices until the centers puffed up and the edges caramelized to crispy perfection. That sizzling disc went between 2 pieces of white bread, store-bought if the family was doing okay, homemade if times were tighter, with mustard or mayonnaise if available. The hot fat from the bologna soaked slightly into the bread, creating a satisfying contrast of textures. During the Depression, when a factory worker might earn 45 cents per hour, A fried bologna sandwich provided a hot, filling lunch for less than a nickel. Children carried them to school wrapped in waxed paper, the bread still slightly warm and fragrant with fried meat. The sandwich became so embedded in American culture that many who grew up during the Depression continued making them for their own children and grandchildren, passing down this simple pleasure that proved good. Food didn't require expensive ingredients. Beans with salt pork. A pound of dried beans cost a nickel during the Depression, and a small piece of salt pork or ham hock added another nickel, yet this combination could feed a family for 3 days. The beans, Navy, Pinto, or Great Northern, would soak overnight, then simmer all day with that precious bit of pork, transforming into creamy, flavorful sustenance. The salt pork rendered its fat into the cooking liquid, while its salty, smoky essence permeated every bean. Smart cooks added an onion, if they had one, maybe a carrot or celery stalk, but the beans and pork alone created magic. The first night's dinner featured bowls of beans with cornbread to soak up the rich pot liquor. The second night, leftover beans got mashed and reformed into patties, fried crispy in the skillet. The third day's lunch might be bean sandwiches or beans mixed with whatever vegetables remained in the pantry. During the worst years of the Depression, when unemployment reached 25%, these bean pots kept millions alive. The smell of beans cooking became the perfume of perseverance, and that small piece of salt pork represented the difference between mere survival and a meal with actual flavor and satisfaction. Red beans and rice. Monday was wash day across America, and in Louisiana and throughout the South, that meant red beans and rice for dinner. This wasn't just tradition, it was practical genius. The beans could simmer all day unattended, while women dealt with the labor-intensive washing, and the dish used Sunday's ham bone for flavor. A pound of small red beans, that leftover bone with its clinging meat scraps, an onion, and a pot of water would bubble away from morning until supper time. The beans broke down partially, creating a creamy, thick gravy that clung to fluffy white rice. At roughly 15 cents to feed 6 people, this meal delivered complete protein and stuck to your rib satisfaction. During the Depression, families who couldn't afford even a ham bone would use pickle meat, cheap pickled pork, or just salt and pepper with a spoonful of lard. The holy trinity of onions, bell peppers, and celery went in when available, but the dish remained delicious with just onions or even garlic alone. That steaming plate of red beans over rice represented more than dinner. It was comfort, tradition, and proof that poverty couldn't steal the pleasure from a well-cooked meal. Hoppin' John. Every New Year's Day in the South, families ate Hoppin' John for good luck, but during hard times, this combination of black-eyed peas and rice with a bit of pork became a year-round survival food. Legend said the peas brought luck, and the greens served alongside represented money, but the real fortune was a meal that cost pennies. Dried black-eyed peas were among the cheapest legumes, ignored by many as field peas or animal feed, which kept prices low for those who knew their value. Cooked with a ham hock, bacon ends, or even just salt pork, the peas released an earthy, almost nutty flavor that elevated simple rice into something special. The cooking liquid, thick with dissolved starches and pork essence, bound everything together. A pound of peas and 2 cups of rice could feed 8 people for about 20 cents total. During the Depression, families might eat Hoppin' John several times a week, varying it slightly with onions, garlic, or hot peppers from the garden. The dish provided complete protein, filled bellies, and maintained a connection to cultural traditions even when times were hardest. Cornmeal mush. Before it was polenta on restaurant menus, it was mush, the breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner of struggling Americans. Cornmeal cost 3 cents per pound during the Depression, and 1 pound could make enough mush to feed a family twice. The preparation was simple. Boil water, whisk in cornmeal to avoid lumps, and stir until thick. For breakfast, families ate it hot with a drizzle of molasses or a pat of butter when available. But the real magic happened with leftover mush. Poured into a loaf pan and chilled overnight, it solidified into a firm block that could be sliced and fried until crispy outside and creamy inside. These fried mush slices became the bread for open-faced sandwiches, the base for creamed vegetables, or simply a hot filling meal with syrup. In Appalachia and the rural South, where corn grew readily and wheat was expensive, cornmeal mush sustained entire communities. Children walked to school with cold mush sandwiches, workers carried fried slices wrapped in cloth for lunch, and mothers stretched the grocery money knowing they could always make mush to fill hungry stomachs. Johnny cakes. These simple cornmeal pancakes trace back to Native American cooking, but became Depression-era staples when wheat flour grew expensive. Just cornmeal, salt, and hot water or milk formed a batter that could be dropped onto a hot griddle greased with bacon drippings or lard. Unlike wheat pancakes that required eggs and leavening, Johnny cakes needed only 3 ingredients that most households kept on hand. They cooked up crispy-edged and slightly gritty, with a sweet corn flavor that paired perfectly with butter and syrup or savory toppings like beans. Rhode Island and New England families insisted on white cornmeal for proper Johnny cakes, while Southern cooks used yellow, but both versions cost virtually nothing to make. A batch using 2 cups of cornmeal could produce enough Johnny cakes to feed 6 people for less than a nickel. They appeared at every meal: breakfast with molasses, lunch with cheese if available, dinner as a bread substitute. The batter kept for days, so mothers could mix up a large batch Sunday night and cook fresh Johnny cakes all week. These humble corn pancakes proved that the simplest foods often provide the most reliable comfort. Cornbread and milk. This wasn't a recipe so much as a ritual of thrift and comfort that sustained millions through lean times. Leftover cornbread, and there was always leftover cornbread when it cost 3 cents to make a pan, got crumbled into a bowl and covered with cold milk or buttermilk. Some called it crumble in, others just cornbread and milk, but everyone who grew up eating it remembers the combination of textures, crispy edges softening in the milk, creating a porridge-like consistency that was part cereal, part dessert. During the Depression, when a quart of milk cost 10 cents and had to stretch across many uses, this dish made a filling breakfast or light supper. Children would eat it as an after-school snack with a drizzle of honey or molasses. In summer, cold buttermilk over cornbread provided cooling relief without ice or refrigeration. Families too poor for milk used pot liquor, the liquid from cooking greens or beans, creating a savory version that was equally satisfying. The practice was so common that many who lived through the Depression continued eating cornbread and milk into prosperity, finding comfort in this simplest of pleasures: oatmeal porridge. At 2 cents per pound for bulk oats, oatmeal porridge filled more stomachs for less money than perhaps any other food during hard times. A single pound could make breakfast for a family of 5 for 3 days. The preparation required nothing fancy, just oats, water, and heat. Cooked slow and thick, it stuck to ribs all morning. When milk was available, a splash made it creamier. A spoonful of sugar, molasses, or honey transformed it into something children would eat eagerly. But creative Depression-era cooks went beyond basic porridge. They'd make it extra thick, pour it into a pan, and let it set overnight. The next morning, these oatmeal slices could be fried in bacon grease until crispy, creating an entirely different meal. Some families added oatmeal to stretch meatloaf, thicken soup, or bind potato pancakes. Scottish and Irish immigrants brought traditions of savory porridge, cooking oats with salt, and serving with butter, which provided variety when sweeteners were scarce. The Quaker Oats box became as essential as the flour sack in American pantries, promising strength for the day at a price any family could afford: rice pudding. Leftover rice never went to waste during the Depression. It became tomorrow's rice pudding, transforming last night's starch into a creamy dessert that felt like luxury. A cup of cold rice mixed with milk, an egg if available, sugar, and a handful of raisins would bake into golden comfort. The dish represented perfect economy. Rice cost 3 cents per pound, the milk and egg were often from backyard animals, and raisins added sweetness and texture for another penny. Vanilla extract, when the budget allowed, elevated it further. Smart cooks knew dozens of variations: add cinnamon and nutmeg for spice, use honey instead of sugar, substitute evaporated milk when fresh ran out. Some made stovetop versions, stirring constantly, until thick and creamy. Others preferred baked pudding with its golden top and custard-like interior. Rice pudding appeared at church suppers, school lunches, and Sunday dinners, proof that dessert didn't require expensive ingredients. Children who grew up during the Depression often cite rice pudding as their favorite treat, remembering how their mothers could make something special from ingredients that seemed like nothing. Potato soup. When potatoes sold for a penny per pound during the Depression's worst years, potato soup became the universal answer to hunger. Every household had its version, but the base remained constant: potatoes, onions, and liquid, whether water, milk, or saved cooking broth. The potatoes broke down partially during cooking, thickening the soup naturally without expensive cream or flour. An onion added depth, salt pork or bacon provided richness when available, and celery or carrots contributed extra nutrition if the garden yielded them. A pot starting with 5 pounds of potatoes could feed a family for 2 days, costing less than a dime total. Mothers would leave the pot simmering on the back of the stove, adding water as needed, letting family members ladle out bowls whenever hunger struck. The soup improved with age as flavors melded, and potatoes dissolved further into velvety smoothness. Some added cabbage for bulk, others stirred in cheese rinds for flavor, and many dropped in homemade dumplings to make it heartier. This humble soup proved that the most basic ingredients, treated with care and patience, could produce profound satisfaction. Cabbage soup. At 2 cents per pound when other vegetables cost 5 times more, cabbage saved countless families from hunger and malnutrition. Depression-era cabbage soup started with a head of cabbage chopped rough, potatoes for substance, onions for flavor, and whatever else could be spared: carrots, celery, turnips. The vegetables simmered in water or broth made from bones saved over weeks. As the cabbage cooked down, it sweetened and softened, creating a broth that was both nourishing and surprisingly flavorful. A single head of cabbage could produce enough soup to feed 6 people for 2 meals, stretching even further with added water and potatoes. Some families kept a perpetual pot going, adding fresh vegetables as they acquired them, never letting the fire die completely. The soup's reputation as poor food meant those with any money avoided it, keeping prices low for those who needed it most. Yet many who ate cabbage soup from necessity grew to love its honest, comforting flavor. Immigrants from Eastern Europe added paprika and vinegar for their versions, while Italian families might include tomatoes when available, proving that poverty couldn't suppress culinary creativity. Split pea soup. Dried split peas cost even less than other legumes, often selling for 2 cents per pound because they cooked down to mush and lacked the prestige of whole beans. Yet this very quality made them perfect for soup that could stretch impossibly far. A ham bone from Sunday's dinner, or just the bone begged from the butcher, would simmer all day with green or yellow split peas until they dissolved into thick, warming sustenance. The peas broke down completely, creating a soup so thick a spoon would stand upright in it. 1 pound of split peas could make enough soup to feed 8 people, and leftover soup only improved overnight as flavors deepened. Families added potatoes to make it heartier, carrots for sweetness, or barley when available for extra bulk. The soup provided complete protein when served with bread, cost almost nothing to make, and could simmer unattended while parents worked. Children sent to school with thermoses of split pea soup stayed warm and full all day. Even without meat, the soup satisfied with just onions, garlic, and patience, proving that the humblest ingredients could produce profound nourishment. Liver and onions. While wealthy shoppers passed by organ meats, Depression-era families knew liver offered more nutrition per penny than any other protein. Beef liver cost 5 cents per pound when steak cost 40 cents, and it provided iron, vitamins, and satisfaction that growing children desperately needed. The classic preparation involved dredging thin liver slices in seasoned flour, then frying quickly in hot lard or bacon grease, while onions caramelized alongside. The onions weren't just flavoring, their sweetness balanced liver's mineral-rich intensity, making it palatable even for reluctant eaters. Cooked properly, just until pink inside, liver stayed tender and juicy. Overcooked, it turned tough as shoe leather, leading to its later reputation as punishment food. But Depression-era cooks knew the tricks, soaking in milk to mellow the flavor, cutting it thin for quick cooking, serving immediately while hot. A pound of liver could feed a family of 4 with leftovers for sandwiches, providing more nutrition than they'd get from 3 times the cost in regular meat. Many doctors actually prescribed liver for anemic patients, making it medicine as much as meal. Tripe or oxtail stew, butchers practically gave away the parts that rich customers scorned. Oxtails for 3 cents per pound, tripe for even less. These tough, unglamorous cuts required long, slow cooking, but rewarded patients with rich, gelatinous broths and tender meat. Oxtail stew would simmer all day, the bones releasing marrow and collagen that created body and depth impossible to achieve with expensive cuts. Vegetables went in during the last hours, potatoes, carrots, turnips, absorbing the magnificent broth. Tripe, the stomach lining of cattle, needed careful cleaning and hours of simmering, but transformed into tender, flavorful strips that absorbed seasonings beautifully. Mexican families made menudo, Italian families created trippa alla romana, and Southern families stewed it with tomatoes and hot peppers. A single oxtail or 2 pounds of tripe could create enough stew to feed 6 people for 2 days. The bones got saved for dog food or another round of broth making, extracting every molecule of nutrition. These dishes required time but little money, perfect for households where someone was always home to tend the stove. Scrapple. Pennsylvania Dutch families had made scrapple for generations, but during the Depression, this everything but the oink creation spread wherever thrift mattered more than squeamishness. After butchering, every scrap of meat got scraped from the head, organs were cleaned and chopped, and everything simmered until falling apart. This meat slurry mixed with cornmeal and spices, then poured into loaf pans to set firm. Sliced and fried until crispy outside and creamy inside, scrapple turned waste into breakfast. A single hog's worth of scraps mixed with cheap cornmeal could produce enough scrapple to feed a family breakfast for a month. At zero waste and maximum nutrition, it represented the ultimate in Depression-era efficiency. Commercial versions appeared in stores for those without access to butchering, costing pennies per pound. City families discovered what rural folks always knew. When fried properly, scrapple developed a crispy crust that rivaled bacon, while the interior stayed soft and savory. Served with eggs when available, or just with syrup or apple butter, scrapple proved that necessity could mother deliciousness. Collard greens with ham hock. A mess of collards from the garden and a single smoked ham hock could feed a large family for less than a quarter. The greens grew easily even in poor soil, survived frost that killed other vegetables, and actually tasted better after cold weather sweetened them. That ham hock, really just bone, skin, and a bit of meat, cost almost nothing but transformed the greens into something magical. The long, slow simmer extracted every bit of smoky, porky essence from the hock while breaking down the tough greens into silky submission. The resulting pot liquor was liquid gold, drunk straight from cups for its nutrients or soaked up with cornbread. A single planting of collards could provide greens from September through March, making them crucial for winter nutrition when fresh vegetables disappeared. Families would strip leaves as needed, letting plants continue growing. The cooking process couldn't be rushed. At least 2 hours of simmering, longer for tougher leaves. But that slow transformation represented more than just cooking. It was alchemy that turned garden greens and butcher scraps into soul-satisfying sustenance. Potato pancakes. When potatoes were the only vegetable in the root cellar and flour was running low, potato pancakes provided hot, crispy satisfaction that felt like a treat despite costing almost nothing. Grated potatoes mixed with just enough flour to bind. Maybe an egg if the hens were laying, salt and pepper, then fried in hot lard until golden and crispy. The contrast of crunchy exterior and creamy interior made them irresistible. German and Eastern European immigrants brought recipes from the old country where potato pancakes had sustained families through countless hard winters. During the Depression, these latkes, or kartoffelpuffer, appeared on tables across America. 2 pounds of potatoes could make enough pancakes to feed 6 people, costing maybe a nickel total. Served with applesauce, sour cream when available, or just salt. They made a meal feel special. Leftover mashed potatoes worked too, mixed with flour and reformed into patties. The secret was the temperature, hot enough to crisp immediately, but not so hot they burned before cooking through. That sizzle when batter hit the pan promised something wonderful despite the humble ingredients. Dandelion greens salad. Free food grew in every yard, vacant lot, and roadside, if you knew what to look for. Dandelion greens, dismissed as weeds by those who could afford grocery store lettuce, provided vitamins and minerals crucial for health. Young leaves picked before flowering tasted pleasantly bitter, similar to expensive endive. Older leaves needed blanching to reduce bitterness, but still offered nutrition when seasoned properly. During the Depression's worst years, families would send children out with baskets to gather dandelions, lamb's quarters, purslane, and other edible weeds. A simple vinaigrette of vinegar and oil, or just vinegar when oil was dear, dressed the greens. Hot bacon dressing, when possible, made them absolutely delicious. Some families cultivated patches of dandelions, knowing they'd produce greens earlier in spring and later into fall than garden lettuce. The practice was so common that seed companies actually sold dandelion seeds for intentional cultivation. These foraged salads cost nothing but time and knowledge, providing fresh vegetables when money couldn't buy them. Which of these resourceful dishes surprises you the most? Vinegar pie. When lemons cost more than most families could spare for a pie, resourceful cooks discovered that vinegar could provide the acidic tang needed for a custard-style dessert. This chemistry experiment turned kitchen staple into treat. Eggs, sugar, butter, flour, and plain white vinegar combined to create a filling that set into smooth, tangy custard when baked. The vinegar's sharpness mellowed during baking, leaving just enough tartness to balance the sweetness, fooling many into thinking they were eating lemon pie. At roughly 15 cents to make when a real lemon pie might cost 40 cents, vinegar pie let families maintain the tradition of Sunday dessert even through the hardest times. The recipe spread through community cookbooks and church circles, each cook adding their own touches, a pinch of nutmeg, a splash of vanilla, or browning the top under the broiler for color. Some called it mystery pie and challenged guests to identify the secret ingredient. Most never guessed that humble vinegar was responsible for that perfect sweet-tart balance. The pie represented more than dessert. It proved that ingenuity could overcome any shortage. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed exploring these 25 resourceful recipes, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.